We have two sets of minutes before us today. January the 16th, we had a meeting. The minutes are here. And February 6th, let's take these in order. Are there any changes or exceptions or anything to the January 16th minutes?
Mr. Atkins?
Yep.
Did you want to do the roll call first?
Yeah, that's good. We'll do that.
Do you have a?
Larry
Go
Porter?
ahead.
Here.
Jack Looney?
Here.
Garland Land?
Here.
Joe Zack?
Here.
Mark McDonald?
Here.
Jerry Atkins?
Here. Okay, any additions or corrections to the January 16th minutes? All right, moving on. Any corrections or additions to the February 6th minutes? All right. Those items are out of the way. I get to everything. Motion to approve the January 16th meeting minutes.
So second.
Who moved?
I made a motion.
Okay, second. Okay, all in favor, roll call.
Larry Porter?
Yes.
Jack Looney?
Yes.
Garland Land?
Yes.
Joe Zack?
Yes.
Mark McDonald?
Yes.
Jerry Atkins?
Yes.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I make a motion to approve the February 6th minutes as it read.
Second.
Okay, roll call.
Larry Porter?
Yes.
Jack Looney?
Yes.
Garland Land?
Yes.
Joe Zack?
Yes.
Mark McDonald?
Yes.
Jerry Atkins?
Yes. Okay, here we are today then on February the 20th. Our next meeting at the bottom of the minutes will be on March the 19th, unless for some reason we have a special meeting before then. And let's move to Jim. Would you work on the update of the electric rate study?
Sure.
Our rates division worked hard and got this all put together since the last meeting and in time to have it ready for you to see today. Now again, these are the numbers, these are the rates. We're still working on drafting the language that'll actually go into the rate book, the rate proposal that'll be go before the council. But these are the numbers so you can see what rates we're proposing. As we discussed before, we took what was a very complicated rate structure with 22 different classes and consolidated that down. There are 4 major classes: residential, commercial, industrial, and then municipal and lighting. Within those, you can see that that's broken down into what are industry standard, typical divisions that you would see at other utilities as well. Residential space heating, the 3 different classes within commercial, large power, special contract, interruptible service, and then the private lighting and the municipal rates. The next set of slides you're going to see is each of those explained, breaking down how that would impact or how that will show up on the customer's bill. Starting with residential, you can see that we're recommending a customer charge of $10. Question last month was, okay, how did we come to that number? The cost of service study that was done came up with a cost of service. This is absent power, how much does it cost to provide service to each location? Take care of the meter, take care of the lines, pay for the trucks and the service. $25 was the cost of service that study came up with. we didn't feel that going from a 100% rate based where everything was rolled in to a cost of service model, that was going to be too large of a change to introduce all at once. So our recommendation is let's introduce this concept with a $10 service charge, which is going to be similar to what you see in your other utilities and similar to what our competitors are doing or our neighbors are doing in the areas around us. And you'll see they have different service charges, different customer charges that they've come up with. Ours was $10, and this will help us to capture the cost of service, whether that customer is using several hundred kilowatt hours of service or whether they're on vacation and not using much at all. That cost of service will still be there, spread out over our customer base. So the $10 monthly charge. Then comes the rate-based piece of it. We've got our off-peak and on-peak rates. We've got there, you can see it's 11.2, 11.6 cents per kilowatt hour. As we said last month, we have incorporated our current average power cost adjustment, so that is going to go back to zero for this to start with, and will be reviewed. It'll be reviewed monthly as it always is, but whether we do a annual correction or one more frequent, depending on the need, that'll be something we evaluate month to month within Power and Light. And the director will make that decision. You can see how that then calculates to a bill. On their billing statement, you'd be able to see the customer charge, the amount of energy that was used for that meter read, times the rate, any power cost adjustment. Like right now, it's zero, so that'll stay as zero, and then the pilot charge, which shows what the charge is going back to the city.
The pilot is 9.08, as I remember. And what's this effective rate? What does that mean?
The number depends on which direction you're doing the math. We pay 9.08 of our total revenue. So you take our total revenue times 9.08, and that gets what Power and Light returns to the general fund. If you're coming from the bottom up, then it works out to be the same number, but it's what you're multiplying the customer charge or the customer's bill times that 9.99 gets you the same thing as if you're coming from the top back down.
The gross receipts that includes the tax, if it's in the current rates, if you multiply it times 9.08, you get that 10%, that gross receipts, the actual tax. So it's the same number. It's just
I'll trust you.
Yes, it's math.
Okay.
Again, it's whether you're taking the lower rate and multiplying a charge up, or taking that total and then dividing it back out. It's a slightly different percentage, but it's the same number. Now, this shows you how that would compare to our neighbors. That average bill that we just showed you would come at $113 for our customer. That same energy usage would have been a bill of $131 for the Evergy greater metro area and $110 in Evergy West. You can see by the shades, the colors there, the energy usage, the bill is the lighter color, and the franchise fee and the local taxes are the other. The biggest difference between us and the Energy and Evergy West is some of those communities have a lower franchise fee than our 9.08. So the energy charge is pretty darn close, but the difference then being in the taxes and the franchise fee.
So which one is Blue Springs and Green Valley? Which one is Kansas City? And
That must be GMO.
The Evergy West is what used to be known as GMO. So the greater metro area, which would be Blue Springs and Green Valley. And
Jim, this is Robert. The Evergy West calculation we just did it based upon a Lee Summit, and they have their 7.5% franchise fee. The Evergy Metro, as if you were in the Kansas City area. So that's the basis we use. We use Evergy West as if you were in Lee Summit, and Evergy Metro as if you were in the Kansas City, Missouri side.
We're not really sure how Evergy decided the eastern suburbs are Evergy West, but
Yeah, it sounds like it should be east.
then your residential space heating has the same process there. There is a I guess you could say a volume discount. The space heating customers, especially in the winter, they do use a significantly larger amount of power. So above 900 kilowatts, they do get a break.
How did you come up with the 900?
I'll defer to Robert.
The numbers that we used, the 900 on the breakdown of our tiers, that was what Burns and McDonnell developed, and it was using an average based upon where the looking at the rate schedule to where we made sure that you got 6% overall. So the 900 was the break point that they were using, and I think it's comparable to what Evergy uses in theirs, as well as it's comparable to where we were in our existing rate structure. Because the 900 kilowatts is where the space heating kicked in for like our all electric rates kicked in at 900 kilowatts. And that's where we had a dramatic drop in the into the winter weights.
And again, remember the Burns and Max study was designed to produce an overall 6% reduction in rates. So that was the basis of that study. And so these tiers took that into account when they came up with those breakpoints. Again, you can see the comparison, and this time we end up the better of the three. Again, we're pretty close to Evergy West in a lot of these categories, and we're beating the Greater Kansas City rate. Small commercial. Slightly higher customer charge, and then the energy use. You can see the 12.283 as the rate. And again, this produces that overall 6%. From all the previous classes that we had, combining those together, this gives you that overall 6% reduction on where the rates were.
Are we arbitrarily changing the monthly customer charge? Is their cost for small commercial, is their overall cost higher than $25?
The overall cost was $25. That was just in general across the board, $25 was our cost of service.
The small commercial that we're trying to attract to our city a higher rate than we do our regular customers.
Well, some of it is in how we're comparing to the rates that are charged by the other utilities around us, so that we're kind of on an even playing field.
Did we? I guess I was going to later on. Did we look at Columbia or Springfield that are actually municipal utilities? Those are the ones we really should be comparing against.
Well, Springfield. They beat everybody. Because they have a completely different structure of how their utilities are managed and governed. They've got a completely different fuel mix, a lot of coal and hydro that's in their portfolio that helps them keep their costs a lot lower. If we had the same fuel mix, our costs would be lower as well.
In Columbia, they have a situation where they work with the university. And so they're a completely different type of situation also, but they.
Oh, I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry. Columbia has a situation where the university and the city have I can't describe it, but I know that my wife's niece works for the university, and she was describing how the university has their own power plant, and they mix back and forth the university's power plant with the city's power plant, and so you really can't compare the Columbia's situation with the city because of that situation. So you're comparing apples and oranges with Columbia that you can't do with City of Independence.
As far as the mix of generation, the type of fuels that are used, our neighbors here in the Kansas City Metro would be the utilities closest to us.
Yes, but at the same time, Mr. Nail, when you're going against an investor-owned facility or a utility, you're paying investors. You're paying a dividend every quarter. You're paying a return on investment, where in our case, we're not. So that is just as much apples to oranges as it would be whatever circumstances you're talking about with Springfield and Columbia. So I don't know what the answer is, but I want to be closer to whatever Springfield is doing because our ratepayers deserve a much better rate than what we're giving them here.
Robert?
Sorry, I had to step out. I had to take a phone call. I apologize for that. The reason we compared against the Evergy this time is we were on short notice trying to at least get some comparison. Going forward, as we have in the past, we've shown comparisons against Columbia and Springfield, and we will probably, and BPU, and we'll probably continue doing that. It's
Okay.
just for a time basis, we only did Evergy because they're right here. And I know we concentrated Evergy West because that's what we were trying to see how we measured up against GMO at the time.
Robert, I truly appreciate that because I think it's important that we don't lose sight of truly who our competitors are. Whatever circumstances are, we need to be trying to get closer to them rather than trying to get closer to an investor-owned utility. The other thing is, I'd like to see what these bills would have been under our old billing system, our old rates. If I had 800 kilowatts, what would my bill look like compared to what you're doing now with the monthly customer charge?
To that aspect, I would say that would be very comparable because when Burns McDonald was trying to do it, was doing the average rate, and all that stuff. And we're doing it on what I would say is our average customer. So the rates were right around the same at 6%. But we can show that for,
Okay.
The existing rates, how that would be.
I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
And then here you can see the result. Again, this is an average bill, so an average customer in that small commercial, that usage would show 111 for us, 115 for Evergy, and 132 for the Evergy West GMO. Their rate and charges were a little higher than what ours compared to. Large commercial. You can see the breakdown, and again, we've got tiers, which are pretty common to what's offered by the other providers in the area.
What's that $9.09? That's just a blanket fee? Or?
That's the demand charge.
Okay. Is it just a one-time deal?
That's based upon your demand per month. So it is for each kilowatt that you use. So if you use 50, it'd be 9.09. Again, that was the numbers that were developed. And again, setting the $9 versus something else, it's just switching. We're trying to, I believe this is a little bit higher than what previously we had a tiered, so you had the higher going, and then the more you use, the less it went. We're trying to simplify it and put everything with everybody the same demand, and then your usage would have it has a higher demand than what we currently have, and our energy rates have gone down. It was just, again, based upon the way we structured our rate structures that Burns Mac did.
Thank you.
Robert? I got a question for Robert. On the demand now, that's if I'm a customer and I reach a demand for the first of the month. Is that right?
Your demand is based upon your highest peak in a 30-minute time period during that your
All right.
rates month.
Does that continue for the whole month then?
We set it based upon your highest demand anytime during that time period, and then the next month it gets we get a new demand number.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Now here's the comparison across the our nearest competitors there. Significantly less than Evergy Metro. Evergy West beat us on this one. Total Electric, that's an all electric customer. Again, you see the demand charge, the tiers for off-peak and on-peak use. You see a bill if you use a large customer that's using 38,000 kilowatt hours across the month. This is how their bill would calculate. We don't really have a direct comparison for not a comparable customer that we could compare that to in our neighboring areas. So that one we don't have a comparison for you. Large power, even more usage, 75,000 kilowatt hours in this example. Again, the demand charge, customer charge, the tiers for the usage rate. And that would compare across the, again, significantly less than Evergy Metro, and we're a little higher than Evergy West in this case. A big part of the difference there is in the pilot charge. Again, Evergy West, the one we use, and each of the communities has their own franchise fee and their own tax rates. Lee Summit, theirs being lower than ours is a good part of that difference at this level of bill. Special contract interruptible, we do offer that, and in that case, here's how the bill would be structured. And again, we don't have a example to compare that to across our neighbors. Our municipal rate, part of the process for developing this new rate structure was to include a municipal rate. Previously, all of our municipal accounts were spread across whatever happened to be that type of property. If it was an office building, it was the same as an office building. If it was an athletic field, it was the same as a private field. So all of our different city buildings were in different rate classes as opposed to an overall municipal rate. So part of this process was to create a municipal rate, and you can see here, got the customer charge, the 5 cents per kilowatt hour on peak or off peak, and how that bill would calculate.
Will you be able to compare that one with what the charges were previous to what this new system is?
I'm going to step in on that one. That's because it's going to be difficult to do a straight comparison because they're going from so many different rate classes. You're going from, we have one residential, you've got small commercial, large commercial, total electric, you've got some that are on space heating, all that.
Do you make a separate bill for each one of these buildings? Or do you just give them a one-shot thing? He does, point at Brian, do they just do
No, they would get a charge for each account. So without us giving individual accounts, showing comparison, what we used in our comparison was an average usage, so that we aren't showing a customer's bill and all that stuff, what it would be. So that's why there's a lot less customers to do that, and their usage spread so much that you'd be almost showing somebody's account, an individual account.
But in this particular case, all the municipal facilities were metered separately, So they're read separately and billed, and then those, I would assume customer services combined those for the different departments, but each of the facilities was read and metered separately.
I would think you could take the meter and see how much usage you had and multiply it times a nickel, and you'd be able to come up with what that payment would be versus what the payment is today.
And you could do that from account to account. But as far as putting an example up on the board, we've got so many different rate classes. The municipal facilities were scattered over all the different.
And I guess what I'm asking for, just give me a bottom line.
About 60%, 55 to 60% less.
Overall.
So what we've done is we've created a system that the overall average is 6%, and we're giving the municipal rate 50% reduction.
That 5 cents is based on the market cost of power. So it does not include costs.
It's just hard for me to wrap my arms around it.
I understand.
This was part of a resolution that when the budget was approved last year was part of that budget adopting such a rate.
Was it part of the same resolution where we stopped paying for streetlights? Did the city stop paying for the electricity for the streetlights?
No, this was part of the budget adoption.
So is the city going to pay for the streetlights now at a 60% reduction, or are we still going to not pay? I don't know the answer.
Yeah,
but,
I'll have to ask. I'll have to figure that out.
but according to the charter, the only real benefit we're supposed to be getting as a city is the pilot. And what we've done now is we're getting free electricity for the streetlights, and we're reducing their rates by 60%. And we're going to catch that all up on the backs of the regular customers. Is that correct? Am I making something up, or is that?
I think what Jim is saying is that this, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it covers our purchasing cost for the power.
The 5 cents would be the average of your what we get charged from SPP. So
I truly
just the purchase
understand
power.
that, and I don't know that I disagree with it. But my problem is I don't see that matching up with what's in the charter. If someone could explain that to me, I guess that's what I'm asking for.
I understand your point. I don't have an answer for you.
It's a great deal for the city. That's all I can say. It's not a great deal for the average customer ratepayer.
I understand, Mark. I think you're hitting on something.
Okay, Jim, you
Mr.
don't have an
Looney
answer
had it.
now. Is there a possibility of having an answer maybe at a later date?
Well, the answer is the resolution passed by the city council directed that for the 2019 budget year, a rebate of $666,000 came back to the general fund, and that a municipal rate would be created to replace that in the years going forward. That's what this is.
So that I'm kind of hearing, maybe it's going to change in a few minutes. I don't know how you guys do that, but we're going to pay for our electric for the street lights based on this municipal rate.
No.
Who said that? Who said yes?
The streetlights are not metered, so they would not apply to this rate.
So street lights are still going to be free, and all the municipal buildings are going to be at 60% of what they used to be,
That's correct.
or 50%. I don't know which
It's about
number.
55.
Okay.
Jack.
Where this is significantly different is in the monthly customer charge, although it's not a lot of money. As you say, compare the small commercial to large commercial. The reason for the larger investment or the larger return on the large commercial is because it takes more power and light facilities to build into that. That's three-phase. Many of the smaller customers are single-phase. Here, with all the city's properties, you've got a composite of all of those. So that's where I see this rate varies from the logic on the others. Not in a significant way, but in the monthly charge.
Correct.
So, sometime back, we heard that the.
Use these things.
Sometime back, we heard that the, at least one of the, auto dealerships was complaining that their electrical charges were significantly higher than others throughout the United States. Can you tell us how this, I'm not sure where they are in all these areas. And can you tell us how the rates have been reduced now?
Again, the Burns and Mac, what the study that they did when they took our accounts across the board and took that overall charge and reduced it by 6%. So these consolidated classes, they achieve a 6%, an average 6% reduction over what the rates over the existing rate structure. From one account to another, it's going to vary, but overall, they would see a 6% reduction.
But I realize that on the average it's 6%, but there is some variance between one class and another. So we really don't know for those auto dealerships if they got a bigger or lower than 6%.
Right. From one class to another, we would have to take a look at the individual bill and see where they fell. But again, part of the goal of this process was to create the smaller condensed rate schedule, and in doing so, some of those classes are going to be adjusted more than others in order to achieve that overall 6% and come up with fewer rates.
Okay, let me ask another question. So we have been trying to compete to bring in industry into the city, and we've always compared with Blue Springs and Lee Summit and Green Valley, where they seem to be getting industry that we haven't been able to get. Of the various groups that you've shown here, which of those groups would industry fall into that we're trying to bring into the city? Is there certain classification that we're trying to bring into the city?
Robert, could you answer that?
I think what you're referring to, most of the larger industry would fall either under large commercial, possibly total electric general service, or large power.
Could you bring up those slides to see how we're comparing now?
Our comparison in this was, again, based upon a 6% overall reduction.
But I just want to see how we're comparing.
A large power customer, we would come out ahead. We would be ahead of Evergy Metro,
okay,
and then a little bit higher than Evergy West. Total electric, we didn't have anybody to compare that to. Large commercial, again, we're better than Evergy Metro, a little higher than, say, Lee Summit.
Another thing to take in consideration in this is that in addition to our rates, we also will still have the EDR, Economic Development Rider, which allows customers to get anywhere from like a 30% reduction for, a tiered reduction for a 5-year time period. We're also looking to have a manufacturing rider similar to the EDR that if you qualify it, you'll get a percentage off. Those are going to be a part of the actual papers that we put together and bring forward to council. So do we still have work to do to make our commercial rates more competitive? Yes. At this time, our goal was to implement the 6% as mandated by council. So that's what we've implemented. The next time around, maybe we can implement something different, that if there's future rate reductions, that maybe it'll apply more to the commercial side than the residential side.
But it sounds like it appears that we're in the ballpark now. We're not.
We are.
That argument that we can't compete to bring in industry into the city doesn't seem to be a major barrier.
Well, and you can see the small commercial, we actually are the low
Yeah,
for the
but,
area.
but
So
we're always trying to bring in large industry into
Right.
the city. And it doesn't appear from the ballpark figures here that is a major barrier. And obviously there's other barriers, but that doesn't seem to be the biggest barrier that we've always heard, that industry isn't willing to come in the city because we have such high electrical rates.
If I may, we could look at the large commercial again. I mean, I think what Robert's saying is we have programs that can close those gaps. We're very close, but it's also good to point out that overall, you look at all our utility rates. For instance, our water rates are the lowest in the metro area.
Right.
And when a prospective business or large industry looks to evaluates options on establishing a location, they'll certainly look at all those factors. And I think, certainly with water and now with electricity, we compare favorably to all those and we compete well.
Connection charges, so much.
just to add to that, even connection charges, like even a residential home in Lee Summit, maybe $4,000. Ours is $100. So you start looking at the whole picture and compare everything, and somebody has to make a choice based on location and every other thing that goes into purchasing. That's in a home, but a business is the same way. It's much less expensive to connect in Independence than it is in anywhere in the metro area. So.
This one,
I'm not correcting you, Dan, but also at Lee Summit, they own the line, service line.
That may be, Larry. I don't.
Yeah, they do. They own the service line. They maintain it. Where ours is their customers. So again, that's covers their fees there.
Sure.
That's not true. I don't know. I could argue. I just don't know. I don't live in Lee Summit.
don't argue with me.
I would never argue.
Pending any further questions, that's our rates presentation. We are continuing to work on the language that will be presented for council to approve. And right now, our target is to the second council meeting in March is to have that all drafted and ready to go. Mr. Looney.
It's not a question, but it's a
Microphone.
point that I'd like to make.
Jeez.
This is not a question, so. We just came through a period where we changed the billing process in the water department, and it didn't go exactly smooth. A lot of folks out there, customers, relate to us as incompetent. They'll forget about it one of these days, but we struggled with that for some time. I guess I'm wondering, I'm cautioning that we don't implement this, because last meeting we were not being able to provide it to all customers until some moved, some renovated, something caused them to move to the new rate structure. I just hope that there's not complications embedded in that would cause us to look again like we don't know what we're doing.
Well, and our goal right now is to, again, get this before the council in March, have it approved the first meeting in April, and then implement it July 1. So that would give us 3 months that we could work with programming and testing to make sure that it's ready to roll out.
Well, I'd say it's ready when all customers can be accommodated. It won't happen in 3 months.
Well, but it's not for all customers, it's just for the new ones, as I understand it, right?
Those that are grandfathered, those rates are already in the system. Those rates are already programmed into our billing system, and that won't change. So this will just be programming the billing system for the new accounts.
Yeah. So it's a very small number of accounts that are going to be going to this one. It's going to be phased in over time.
Yeah, but the problem comes when parties feel that
Let's use the mics.
the issue is with people is usually when they sense somebody else is getting a better deal than they are, whether that's right or wrong. Anyhow, I said it was not a question, it was just a comment.
Thank you.
If I may, your thinking's exactly right. I think Dan rightfully brought this up with me a few months ago, and we want to make sure whenever this is implemented that it's thoroughly tested and there are no miscues or misunderstandings with the implementation of this and rolled out. And I think that is also the benefit of the grandfathering, which will allow a smaller rollout of this. But there will be some rigorous testing and before this is actually activated.
Any further?
Yeah, I have, I would assume, Adam, you're saying you're gonna be implemented in July. I would think that we would get a monthly update on how we're doing. Is that right?
If that's what you'd like, yes.
That's what I'd like. Would the board like that? I want it.
Can't hurt.
I have to make a motion.
Dude, that's all right. I trust you.
I appreciate that.
I'm not sure about that guy on your left.
Okay. Discussions on 4 items, Garland on.
Microphone.
For sure, thank you. Thanks for that, Jim, appreciate it, and Robert, you guys have spent a lot of time on that, a lot of hard work. Discussion items on solar farms, Garland?
Well, I don't have anything to discuss. I had requested at a previous meeting that we have a presentation on the solar farms, and I'm still just requesting that we have a presentation. It's not from me. I just want to have staff make a presentation on update on the solar farm and where we stand with it.
I do have something about solar I'd like to ask. Just like with the combustion turbines, I think we need to start planning on what we can do. I know that we have a very dire cash flow and also projected net present value for the solar projects. I remember quite well that we all voted for it. We were all excited about being the greenest city in Missouri or the world or whatever. But when the dire net present value came out, we all kind of put our heads under the sand to say, oh my God, can we make this thing go away? Well, that thing is not going to go away. I think we need to look at the possibility of purchasing the solar farms outright in 7 years or whatever the hell it is. And also we need to be looking at the possibility of purchasing battery power to see what our options are and actually use the solar as a part of our capacity issue that we currently are in need of. When and if we decide the special rate committee decides that we're going to move to eliminate the combustion turbines, we need something that we can rely on. I don't disagree about the startup capability or the boosting capability of the CTs, but maybe somehow the solar can fit into that. I think it's time that we look at, and last I heard, we call them subscriptions, right? Yeah. I heard our subscriptions are full on the first phase, and we're at 50% or whatever it is at the second phase. We need to see what we can do to turn the situation around to make it positive to the ratepayers rather than just dumping another thing onto the ratepayers. I guess that would be my hope, that as a utility that we would look into that. And we've already made the decision that we're going with solar. We can all use it as a political football that somebody's getting a kickback or somebody's doing something wrong. But bottom line is it's ours, and we need to make the best out of ours that we possibly can. So if you could, let's look at those options or what other options we might have to utilize, because solar is not a bad thing. It's not a dirty word. We may have bought into something that was not economically a good deal for the city, and I get that. But we need to turn it around and do the best we can with it. So I'd appreciate any help you could give us on that.
Anything else on the solar item?
Yeah, Mr. Atkins, if I may, when looking at this request, I went back and just to understand how this board has typically functioned in the past, the rules of procedure and those types of things to see, how this board conducts business. And I may offer a suggestion here, and it would, we want to be responsive to the board's requests. We want to be accountable to you all in our work. So if I may make a suggestion that any kind of request for information that if we believe it will take longer than 4 hours of staff time to look at or review, that we would get a majority of the board to make that recommendation and approve it. That will be respectful of our staff time and as well as working with the board, being accountable to you all. So I just may make that suggestion now when we're talking about the solar farms and pulling that information together. I think in looking at how long that would take, we're looking at 4 hours per location is what we estimate that would take us.
So are you requesting that we make a formal request to put this on the agenda?
I think what I would ask is that you make a formal request and the majority of the board would approve that we would go look at investigating this information, pulling it together and bringing it back to this group. And that would be as far as going forward, when we have requests that we believe would take in excess of 4 hours of staff time, then we would follow that process.
Garland, go ahead and make a motion.
So I move that the board requests that the staff make a presentation on the solar farm.
I second it.
Okay, any further discussion on the solar farms or the motion?
Yes, sir. I guess I'm a little surprised.
Mike, please.
Yes, go ahead.
I put that around my neck. I guess I'm a little surprised that our consultant, when reviewing power sources, didn't entertain some of the things that Mr. McDonald mentioned here. They seem reasonable, but I didn't see them on any consideration.
Are you talking about what?
Well, for instance, buying the solar sites. That has a price, it has a ticket, it has operational costs, it has benefits, but we didn't see any of that.
In which presentation? The one that Jim just did about the rates, or the Burns and Mac study? I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah, I think it's before your time.
Okay, yeah. So we'll go back and look at all that information. Absolutely, if that's what majority of the board wants us to do, and bring a presentation back to you.
Do we need to amend his motion to add that additional work to it?
It would be appreciated if the board were very clear with what they wanted from us, and then we will go get it.
Okay. Then we need to amend it, I guess.
Well, there might be differences of opinion on what we want. My interest and there can be others who would want to indicate their interest. My interest was just to know basically where we stand in terms of the number of subscriptions, what the income and expense was for the solar farms, and breaking those out between the two solar farms, having the information on the subscriptions and the income and expense between the two. That was my initial interest. Mark may have some other interests, and that's fine. If you want to indicate what your interests are, that's fine also.
Is this the appropriate time to do it?
Yes.
I would like to add that we look at the options available to us with the freaking solar farms. Put freaking in there if you'd like, to see what we can do to improve the net present value for the next 20 years or 15 years, whatever the horizon is, so that we can dig ourselves out of this hole we put ourselves in. That would be my addition to the motion.
I second the motion as amended.
Christina, are you even close to having the emotion?
Are you having emotions?
Okay, you added an amendment and you added an amendment. What?
He asked for the original, to see where subscriptions are,
Right,
profit margin,
right.
all that stuff.
And then it was amended.
No,
So
I didn't amend it.
He didn't amend it.
I thought you did. Okay, and then you did?
Yes, I asked to see what we could do to dig ourselves out of the hole.
Get a shovel. Kick it out.
Okay,
Plant potatoes.
any further discussion about this? Are you ready to vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, let's do a roll call.
Larry Porter,
Yes.
Jack Loney,
Yes.
Garden Land,
Yes.
Joe Zack,
Yes.
Mark McDonald,
Yes.
Jerry Atkins.
Yes. So, thanks for that. Garland,
If I may, I appreciate that, and it's not our intent to create a barrier or be difficult to work with you all. We just want to make sure we're accountable and respectful of everyone's time with that request. Okay, we appreciate it.
In regard
Adam.
to that,
Adam, you're correct. I think this board has to get more proper in its request to you so that you have the proper procedure, so we don't come back and say, well, you didn't get it. And this is not an arguing committee. This is a committee to help you, and you're to help us. So I appreciate the effort, and I think this board needs to get more professional in its operation. Thank you.
as a follow-up to both of your comments, we historically ask for things and don't see them.
That's true.
So fixing a time limit or some kind of a response would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, we will huddle up after this meeting and look at the request and then provide a timeline to the board. Okay. Absolutely, and our intent absolutely is we want to be accountable to you all. If you make a request and you all, a majority of the board makes that request, we want to oblige that request.
okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
We've already voted.
I'm sorry, okay.
Welcome to the meeting.
Right, welcome to the meeting, yeah, okay. Then Garland, let's move on to the next section, which has to do with a revised statute from Missouri.
At a previous meeting, I had offered a suggestion that whenever a board member comes to a meeting to present a resolution to the board, that resolution be included in the packet so that we're prepared when we come to the meeting to understand what we're going to be voting on. I found out that Section 610.020 of the revised statutes actually addresses this issue, and I just wanted to inform the board so that my comments were pertinent to actually what the law says. In the open records section of the Missouri statutes, there's a phrase in that statute that says, besides informing the public of what the agenda is, it also says, devise the public of the matters to be considered. Now, that's kind of a general phrase, but I think it can be interpreted to say that the matters to be considered should include any resolution that would be considered by a public body. And that's basically what the city council does whenever they're going to be voting on an ordinance or a resolution, that they always have it on their agenda in advance so the public knows what they're going to be voting on. So I just wanted to let us know that that's just good public policy, that whenever we're going to be voting on something, that the public knows that we're going to be voting on it. And I just bring that to our attention. I don't think it's controversial or anything. I think it's just something that it's helpful to us as members of the PUAB that we have an opportunity to be aware of something that we're going to be voting on in advance. And just want to let you know that that's already in statute.
Thank you.
Does our counselor have any notions about that?
Mr. Land makes a great point that it's nice to have as much notice to our public as possible. City Council did go through this instance about a year ago. The section you're referring to, 610.020, talks about a tentative agenda, and that's what we do every board meeting and council meeting. If you remember, Councilmember DeLucy had an issue with motions being brought up on the dais and not being noticed. The council did not agree with the interpretation that that section included motions. And so what they did to correct that behavior was to amend their rules of procedure to say any action items would require 24-hour notice. I would, if that is the board's intention, then I would suggest that you all do a bylaws amendment to include similar language that's in the rules of procedure for council, that 24 hours notice for any action item. But as that section, what you're wanting, that section, in my opinion, does not cover that. But if that's what the board's intention is, then you all are free to amend your bylaws to require that.
Didn't we just violate that? With the motion that we just made, wasn't given 24 hours in advance?
Well, that's your interpretation of what an action item is. That's why it's funny. So I wouldn't say you violated any laws just now. That's why when that amendment for the council rules of procedure was for action items, it's a sticky word. Like, what is an action item? Surely you wouldn't want to give the board as much leniency as possible to make requests to staff, to make requests of each other during a formal public meeting. So while it's great to have as much transparency as possible, and hold the board, your fellow board members accountable and being forthcoming with what actions they want to see, you just have to be very careful with what you would want to require of each other and what you put in writing. But as far as making motions from every day from the board during a public meeting, I think you're okay. It happens. City council does it frequently until about a year ago when they passed their rules of procedure. They tried to kind of narrow that down to give notice, and now they put those on agendas.
With regard to Adam's request a few moments ago, though, do you suppose that would you advise us to relook our rules and procedures and maybe amend something in there?
Well, in your agenda for today, it does say solar farms, or whatever that means. You did make a request about solar farms, and that's on the tentative agenda. So that, my opinion, I think you probably gave the public some notice that there will be some sort of discussion on solar farms, whatever that may be. So I think you're good to go on that.
Thanks.
Sarah, could you explain to me, because I'm kind of slow, an action item? This board, what's an action item for us? We give it to the director, and he gives it to council, and they say, no, we're not going to do it. So we don't have any action items. I don't understand where you're coming up with the action item.
Yeah, that's the specific language from the council.
Action. Huh?
That's the specific language that we use in the rules of procedure for council. So they have more action. What they say when they say at the dais, that happens. You guys are an advisory board, so anytime you make an advisory opinion or a request to a council, it's formalized by a motion that you guys do here, and
Is
it's
that
usually
an action then?
yes, I would consider that an action item, but that's based off numerous meetings, discussions, information provided.
Is that any action, Joe?
We just got rid of all kerosene lanterns.
Any further questions regarding that matter? Yes.
It's borderline that matter.
I'm sorry?
It's a borderline to that matter, but I'd like to express a concern. Do I read in the paper, which is how we learn everything, the city manager proposing to set up a review board for the charter?
So I'm trying to see where that'd be on the agenda here, but I believe I believe that was part of what he made a comment about that yesterday at the chamber lunch. Yes, and I think there's some intent to evaluate that in the near future.
Okay, I just would like to make a recommendation, if not from the board, from myself, that boards like this, the other volunteer boards throughout the city, be allowed to meet with that board and discuss things that are important to them, as well as maybe other public meetings. So just a request.
I don't think that's on our agenda. I don't even think it ought to be brought up. That doesn't cover us. There's been no changes made.
I beg your pardon, it does cover us.
It doesn't cover us at this point because there's been no changes made in the city charter. He's setting up a commission. You don't know.
That's right.
I would imagine through the process of establishing that commission and laying out the public discussion related to the charter that there will be opportunities for the various boards and commissions to weigh in on their thoughts and their viewpoints.
Thank you. Apologize to my board members for taking us off track.
Okay, let's move on to the utility payments, the pilot information. That's for city finance and administration department.
He's got your back.
Who the heck is that?
Tried to sneak out, but we got him.
Wayne, no.
He's always up there. It's the same.
Yeah.
You're on.
I'm sorry, is there a specific question?
Yeah, if you look at the agenda and today's menu, there are 2 points there that are on there that are for the city finance and administration department.
Okay.
I think that's what he gave us right now.
So yes, you do have that in your packet. But
Could you explain your spreadsheet? Is this your spreadsheet?
it's not specifically my spreadsheet. What that spreadsheet shows is the transactions that are counted towards the in lieu of, what is subject to in lieu of, and then what the calculation is. It takes those revenue line items in that spreadsheet, multiplies it times the rate, and then that's what the transfer is made up of. I believe the question was, can we get a specific idea of what goes into the transfers, and that's what we provided. And so I'm not sure specifically. I probably could not go line item by line item. I would probably ask one of my accountants to either provide that, or I believe Robert might have some updates on that. But what you're seeing is the revenue transactions that are multiplied times the rate to make that in lieu of transfer.
Is that your report?
Could you explain the intermunicipal agreements?
Yeah, I believe that would be the revenues that we receive from the bills that we send to other municipalities. Robert? I'm going to have to turn this over to Robert.
I'm going to have to potentially defer if that belongs to water and WPC. That may be where it belongs because electric has no. Oh, it is ours? Okay, then, okay, intermunicipal agreements, and that it would probably be, I would have to check into it because I've not seen that before, unless that's specifically there are municipal customer accounts, but I don't think it is.
$5 million.
Kendra.
I think this is a report that came from the IPL accountant for June 30th of last year, so we didn't prepare that, but we can certainly look up any information that we want to ask about it. These are water, IPL, and WPC as of June 30th.
Well, I guess what I was looking for, and hopefully, I was looking for what items are being charged IPL that are not associated with energy. Do we make, and I don't know how to say, any items that are not directly related to the production, the the transmission of energy.
Mm-hmm.
What bills are IPL paying for that are not sponsorships, committees? What kind of things are coming out of IPL funds that are not associated with, in addition to pilot? I know the streetlights is one thing.
Okay. All right. So the question is not specifically the pilot transactions themselves, but you're asking, are there other type of things that IPL is covering that is not specifically related to production of energy or
delivery of electricity
of IPL? So
yeah.
Things that you would identify as not being a true IPL cost. Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think that's.
So I would have to say we'll need to get with Jim and his staff. I would hope that their managers and people approving budgets, and then ourselves, any charge that we are charging to IPL would be associated in some way with a cost to be covered, a legitimate cost, or we wouldn't be charging it against IPL. I mean, that's the theory behind it. So if you're asking me, have we discovered costs?
Yeah, I think this is not, because I asked for it last.
Okay.
Last time you were here, and I think I failed to give the information clearly enough.
So what we had gone off of. So there's a line item in the financials that says in lieu of charge transfers to the general fund.
Yes.
And the question was, what makes that up? Those are the transactions that make that up. It's those transactions times the in lieu of rate is then transferred to the general fund.
Well, that would be the total of pilot.
Yes.
Well, I'm saying in addition to pilot.
And you're saying in addition to pilot?
Yes, sir.
Sorry. What are those costs that may be charged back to the department, or as we're in accounts payable and a bill comes across and we say, oh, this is a IPL bill that's coded to IPL, but you're asking, is there anything coding against IPL that is not IPL related? I think that's what you're asking. Because you're,
I'm not trying to be difficult at all.
No, I just want to make sure, because we're in finance and accounting. We're making a as the bills come in to be paid, they're approved by different managers, and we try as best we can to make sure that it's the right manager signing off on it. And so we would hope that as bills are being charged against IPL, that they're approved by IPL. Now, I know as we're doing some transitions and we're starting to dig through all the charges that are being charged. I know every once in a while, Robert or Jim will say, wait a minute, why am I being charged this? I think an example that recently just comes to my head was some of the server costs in tech service. We have a monitoring service, or I believe it was a maintenance cost, and it was about a $50,000. It was a large bill, and it was divided up. Well, this department pays this much. This department pays this much. So at some point there's been analysis done that says, well, of the servers, this much is allocated to IPL because that's, I know we have 2 or 3 racks full of servers that are specifically IPL. And so at some point analysis was done that says that's what makes up this bill, is this percentage. So, I don't want to put a question in your, but
I'm pretty well spent for the day.
All right. Well, I'm getting that.
It's like full IT.
So in summary, right, there are, I would say, 3 different logistics speaking, three different ways that funds are expended out of IPL. One is direct expense, right? So we have someone go out and purchase wire, for IPL operations. They cut a check and they cut the check. And of course, we have payroll comes directly out of that. Then we have the in lieu of transfers that we just talked about, which is based on a percentage of certain revenues that the utilities have, and then we multiply it times that rate, and that gets that. We have allocated expenditures. So getting back to tech service, because that one just comes to my mind, we have, I believe it's 1.5 FTE worth of our tech service network network positions that are allocated to IPL expenditures.
That makes sense.
Right.
Sure.
So we rotate. Actually, we've recently changed that, but basically we have that extra 1.5 staff with the idea that it takes another 1.5, and maybe the 0.5 might be wrong, maybe 1.25.
1.5 is correct.
It's 1.5 that says, okay, that's what it takes to make sure that we're allocating or we're supporting the network side of IPL out of the full 1,100 employees. Their employees have that. So that is an allocation that we pay for the expense out of tech service in the general fund. And then there's a journal entry that happens that takes 1.5 FTE worth of that salary and benefits and charges it back. Charges it back then to IPL. So that's another way. And then another way, and I would point again to our accountants back there. We've 2 new utility accountants, and they split their time, or theoretically split their time equally among the 3 utilities. And so their expenses are taken 1/3, 1/3, and 1/3. So that's the other way. So direct expenses in lieu of the allocation, that journal entry allocation way, and then other like general fund or personnel that don't report to IPL will be charged their time specifically back based on some kind of an allocation. So that's how the expenditures are taken out of IPL. On the direct expenditure side, again, every one of those are spent or approved by someone at IPL. On the allocation and the chargeback type thing, that at one point, I'm saying at one point, it was like either a time study was done or there was some analysis done saying, well, this is what makes up the charge or the percentage of that charge that does take place or should be charged back to IPL.
I see those things all as a part of the administrative costs for IPL, and I have no problem with that. What I'm asking is those expenditures that are not related to the delivery of electricity to our ratepayers. That's all I'm asking.
Okay.
Do we have any that where we're sponsoring anyone, or are we spending money on commissions or things like that that are coming out of IPL funds that we just need to let the ratepayers know that we're doing?
I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know. And I would say that might, we could, that's probably an internal review that can be done, just to go back and review those.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what Mark is driving at, and I think what we've all kind of questioned at times being, and the lights is the example that we're kind of coming up with, is that at one time lights were paid by the general revenue, and now we're finding that street lights are being paid by IPL, and that decision was made by the city council through the budgeting process, and now we're wondering what other things have been made, what other budget allocations have been made to help the city budget and it almost appears that IPL is kind of the piggy bank to help the city with their budgetary problems. And it's difficult for us to figure that out, right?
Very good. Thank you, Garland.
And we don't know the right questions to ask. And how to ask those questions is difficult for us. But I think that as a PUAB, we ought to be asking those embarrassing questions, if they are embarrassing. I don't know if they're embarrassing. But I think as a PUAB, we ought to be investigating and knowing to what extent IPL is supplementing the city's budget. In addition to the pilot, and we know the pilot, and that's in the city charter, and we respect that. But it appears that there are other ways that IPL has been tapped to support and obviously the city is in dire straits. We understand that, and we respect that. But so we're kind of in a situation not knowing how, as a PUAB, how to investigate, if that's the right word, or at least to open up the discussion so that there's transparency in city government. And I think that's all we're trying to understand. How do we go about doing that?
Thanks, Garland.
I agree with you, Garland. I think Mark, you ought to make a motion on that. What you want.
If I can make I think this is an opportune time. All three utilities are currently putting together their 2021 budget allocation. And again, all expenditures have to be budgeted before they're spent, regardless for the purpose. So that might be something that's, as they're going through the budget, if they identify something that rises to the issues that you would have, I would think maybe that this might be the time to do it as they're putting together the budget. I might pass that along to Adam if that's okay. I don't want to speak out of turn, but
I'd like to say it's not just payments to, thank you, payments to the city, but inappropriate charges to the power and light budget.
I don't know whether they're inappropriate or not. Yeah, and what Brian's talked about with transfer costs and dividing it out, that makes perfect sense to me. We need to be, instead of if it's okay to make a motion, I'd like to make a motion that we get a copy of the upcoming budget on where expenditures are going to be made from IPL to
all three utilities.
Yeah, all three utilities, yeah. Just to get the copy of the budget? Is that what we're looking for? A detailed copy of it?
Pretty tough.
Huh?
It's pretty tough.
the details, I'll be honest, the details are not as detailed as you might want either. I mean, the budget document itself is pretty thick, and even that are some summarized amounts. I think at some point we would need the professional judgment of the managers if they're putting together the budget. So, you know, I mean,
I guess I'm looking for expenditures, planned expenditures for the utilities that are up and beyond pilot payments and are not associated with services designated by the utility, whether it be Lisa's water pollution or Dan and Matt's water or Jim's electric company. Does that make sense?
I think so. Sounds like we need to start at least with kind of those.
That will be more than 4 hours, right?
Yeah,
I know that.
We'll need a
I just
motion,
want to make sure
sir.
that you
Yeah,
know I'm actually
yeah.
out there. It's his.
It sounds like we start with, the proposed budget gets distributed to the council and it's made public. when it's, I forget the exact timeline. I think that starts in May. Beginning of May is when we finally prepare that and get it ready for publication. So maybe during that time period between when it's, the city manager's budget is proposed and when it's formally adopted by
Well,
the
even
council.
last year's would give us an idea. I don't know that we need the next year, but guys, the bottom line here is I'm seeing the rates that are, according to your comparisons, that we're one of the lowest rates, which is I think great. And then we're going to give the city a 55 or 60% reduction in their rates. I don't see how that all adds up to us continuing to have a good rate structure for the future, or how that's all going to match together. You continue to subtract, and somebody's going to have to pick up the bulk of it, is what I'm saying.
And you're driving towards something we just had a discussion about as a staff before we came to this meeting, where let's look at our long-term financial position to see as all these things kind of stabilize and the rate structure gets put in place. What is our financial position over the long term, and that's exactly what we were talking about.
And I think that's really what the purpose of the PUAB is.
Understood. Yeah.
Might I give an example of why I suggested that it's unauthorized expenditure? So my question is to you, Dan. Being the director, you're the only one left here. Over the past few years, does your budget reflect a payment to pay off development, what do we call those, improvement loans that the developers get?
Jack, when you say developers, I'm trying to follow you.
Okay, I can be more specific.
Are you talking about the Uptown Market?
No, I'm talking about Cracker Neck Creek.
So if there's an interfund charge that we're...
It's not an interfund. Each of you utilities were instructed to pay a portion of that developer's costs.
See, I don't know about that. So when that was put in, we had to...
Why wouldn't you know about that?
Well, I'm not understanding your question, because I don't know that there is that we paid for Cracker Neck.
You didn't pay for Cracker Neck. I'm sorry, I can't think of the term that you used to develop rugged property.
I understand the question.
If we have been recently directed to kind of do a pretty rigorous audit of Cracker Neck, and I would imagine that if anything bubbles up from that review, kind of along the lines of what you're asking, that would materialize in that report.
Well, my point in bringing that up is the way that it's labeled in the budget. You'd never recognize it.
Oh, okay. I can add that. I think I can add to that. And I'm trying to remember some of the particulars of the Cracker Neck transaction. I'm getting up to speed with it. Again, I mentioned a year and a half. I think another couple of years I might understand Cracker Neck. But part of the Cracker Neck transaction, overall, the whole development, I do believe included some infrastructure of the streets, water, wastewater, and stormwater. Yeah, so I believe there were expenditures within that district that were from the utilities. I believe there may also be some of the debt outstanding may have some payback because some of those infrastructure costs were covered or were for those type of infrastructure things. But without going too much more in detail, and I think as Mr. Norris said, that we'll during the review of that we'll be able to peg those down a lot closer. Is that closer to the?
In response to that, the utilities don't normally give that kind of break for picking up customers' responsibilities, but as a way to
Invest.
make this sound like it should be done, well, then that's what was determined.
Okay. I do know other communities. I don't have the specifics of how I'm trying to remember now, like development fees for improving rugged, like if the land's does not have water out there now, to extend out there, they do pay some fees. Usually in cases like that, that would be termed an investment, right? So by extending that, there should have been or should be some kind of a cost benefit analysis that says by extending those expenditures, the revenue should offset that. Now, whether or not that was done on that particular transaction, I don't know, and I couldn't answer that. But that would be something that I would recommend is before we do that there'd be a.
Folks, I'd like to recommend that we move on if we can.
Yeah.
We have reports and water pollution control. Lisa has left, but Adam, I would like to have her continue to bring us up to date about those projects. We have numerous projects laying out there, and some of them just seem to just lay out there. And I'd like to see some progress reports on those more up to date.
How about we kind of set up an expectation of, quarterly, so every 3 months we would provide an update on that list of projects. Does that sound acceptable? So on a quarterly basis, that'll be included in the report to PUAB.
If quarterly works better, that's fine, but I'd just like to stay on top of that.
Understood. We would too.
Okay.
Christina?
Anything else from water pollution control? Any questions?
Along that line where we were, Christina, we had a spreadsheet of outstanding. I thought I turned it on. Okay. We had a spreadsheet of outstanding issues. Have we still got that, and is it currently being maintained?
It was not maintained for approximately a year.
Okay.
There's a lot of changes in management, and things just kind of got lost in between the PUAB staff.
Okay, if there's anything outstanding on that, I suggest it be added to the list.
We've started a new one for the 2020 year.
Okay.
We went back through January. We finished it today. Didn't have time to print it to bring today, but I will send that out to you guys in an email.
Okay, thank you.
And then we'll add everything from this meeting to that. And then moving forward, if we have anything that is monthly or quarterly that we need to bring to the board, we'll have that on there constantly. And then as things get taken off the action item log at the top, they'll be moved to, the section that says these things are finished or finalized.
Thanks for all your work, Christina. Appreciate that. And water?
I didn't have any updates today.
Nothing updated. IPL? Jim? Sorry to bother you.
Just to let you know, as far as, is this on?
Yeah.
Okay. To let you know about how projects are going, one of the biggest ones we have on our plate is our rebuild of Sub K. That's the one up there by Coles and off of 39th Street. We've got our engineering team hard at work on that with Transmission Distribution Group, and we're working hard to keep that project on track. That's probably the biggest one we've got.
Great. Thank you. Adam?
It's getting long in the meeting here, so I'll just skip over a lot of what I was going to talk about. There's a copy of a memo in your packet that is in response to the report from the city management analyst. I think the primary item in that memo, and I think I sent that to you all as well, maybe last week, is the matter related to overtime standby pay for exempt employees. I think has been kind of a long-standing issue for IPL. And in this memo, we have several recommendations, many of which are already put in place now. So we'll go from having 10 employees that had been receiving standby pay in some form to 2 that will receive it through June when the plant closes, and then 1 that will receive it until then on a very limited, restrictive basis with very clear criteria. So I think that's positive news. We're moving. That's one of the priorities that we outlined early on when I assumed this role, and so we're well on our way there. So,
Thank you. Congratulations. Thanks.
Adam, is there any update on changing our time on our meeting?
yes, sir. I've heard a suggestion about potentially doing it at 5 o'clock on Mondays prior to city council meetings. That's an option that would address getting more people potentially involved with the PUAB. We already have streaming and video set up in the council chambers, so it would be pretty easy from a logistics standpoint to hold it there prior to city council meetings. I think,
Sounds good.
in talking with the team here, I think that's acceptable for us as well. Certainly.
Thank you. That's acceptable with me.
That'd be it. City council starts at 6.
Yes.
Be a challenge to keep us at
We'll get to
an
the
hour.
Hour and a half now.
We get over fast then.
Yeah,
I like this.
get it over with. Get to
Okay,
the
let's
point.
move on to board comments. Carl? Jack?
No.
Mark?
Apologize for talking so much.
Joe?
Yes, I have a comment. This concerns Power and Light. It concerns some street lights down in Country Meadows. It's a private entity down there, and the lights were handled by the homeowners association. Apparently, it was shoddy when they were put in, and they just fell apart. Anyway, Power and Light came down and made an assessment, and we had a meeting with the board, the CMHA. But other than that, they did an outstanding job. I live down there, so I'm also involved with the board. So it was great to see it working.
Eric?
I don't have any.
Nor do I.
I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Meeting's adjourned.
Everyone's trying to think of.
Oh, the tech.
Yeah. See, the-